On Facebook.
Hey, everybody. I'm so glad that you're with me tonight. We're at night 6 in our Down-Ballot Progressive Candidate Summit. I hope you have been enjoying as much as I have meeting this extraordinary crop of people who are running as progressives for the Senate right now. Remember, all of this is happening within the context of an extraordinary historical moment. I'm sure that you're very aware of what's going on this weekend with the protests. The majority of the protests are peaceful. But there are also some situations going on, not so much on the part of protesters, but on the part of police that are extremely concerning. There was some drama last night in Seattle, for instance, that very much makes one wonder how much control these mayors actually have over their police in certain situations. And that's a serious national issue. Sometimes it feels like certain cops, and I do believe, I'm sure most of us believe, that the majority of cops, police in this country are very fine people, but we've got a problem with some of them. That's obvious. This whole thing started obviously in protesting the well-established pattern, I'm afraid, of the execution of unarmed Black men. And then these protests started protesting police brutality, and what we've seen in cases far too often are instances of police brutality basically against people who were protesting police brutality. Sometimes you hear what you want to hear from the mayor, you hear what you want to hear from the police chief even, or you hear what you want to hear from the governor, and then the police still act the way they're acting, which sometimes is absolutely even the opposite of what the mayor had said. For instance, the mayor of Seattle had said, we're not going to use tear gas for 30 days, and then 3 days later, it was used on a peaceful crowd. Something is going on, some deep, and I must say, I think even some sinister things are going on. But at the same time, that there is this unbelievable exposure of some of the things that are clearly shadow elements of the American psyche and American institutions, not just in terms of criminal justice and policing, but in terms of all kinds of things. At the same time, I'm so proud of my fellow Americans because I think that these protests are just amazing, all over the country and all over the world. And the people really do seem to understand the importance of peaceful protesting, even when we see some real problems with the police. And one of the things I'm going to ask our guest about tonight is what's going on in New York City, because that's his beat. So let's get to our candidate tonight, Mr. Shan Chowdhury. I'm very excited to introduce you to him. He's running in District 5 in New York. He himself will tell you exactly where that is in the city. He's running against a 22-year incumbent, and that's really what all this is about. It's time for a whole new crop of people. It's time for a whole new kind of leadership. It's time for a new progressive Democratic Party, and that's why all of the people that we have endorsed that you can look at progressivecandidatesummit.com. But also, I hope you'll look at that donation page, because remember, these more progressive candidates are not usually the ones that are supported by the Democratic establishment, and support from the Democratic establishment means probably more than anything else, financial support. What do the progressives have? They have you and me. So let me introduce you. Hi, Shan Chowdhury, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us here.
Hi, Marianne. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this.
Well, tell me a little something about yourself. You know, one of the reasons we're doing the summit is because, you know, when somebody's running for president, the public gets to know them. And too often, even though the congressional races are every bit as important, people don't know these candidates in too many cases. And I think in a lot of situations, somebody might say, well, Shan Chowdhury is running in New York and I live in Nebraska, so why does it matter? But I think people are beginning to understand why it matters, because if you're a member of Congress, you're voting on these national legislative issues that affect all of us. And also, I think people more and more understand the importance of the down ballot races, and also just the importance of activism and citizenship now on levels that we never even in our lifetime thought we would need to embrace. So I want people to get to know you. Who are you, young man? I know you were in the Marine Corps, you've been a citizen organizer. I know that you were born and raised in Queens. And also, you know, there were a lot of people who came to my lectures in New York, might live in your district. So please let us know exactly what is your district and what have you done with your life? What got you to the point where you said, I'm going to run for Congress this session against Gregory Meeks?
Oh, thank you again for the nice introduction. There's so much to unpack. Again, my name is Shan Chowdhury. I am a product of public housing and public education, and I'm running for Congress to bring and champion working class representation in New York 5. There are so many progressive candidates throughout the country, and I'm so excited to be running with all of them. But I am a current reflection of the kind of representation I want to bring. I currently live in public housing in low-income communities, so I see these experiences firsthand. Unlike many other candidates, I may not be a lawyer or a teacher, or may not even have experience in legislating before. However, I do have the lived experiences. I've served 6 years in the Marine Corps out of being poverty drafted because I needed housing, healthcare, and education to really support my family. I come from a Bangladeshi immigrant family. My parents came here in search of equality and equity, and instead we faced Islamophobia, we faced housing insecurity, and we lost our home to foreclosure after the financial crisis in 2008. And it forced us to live in public housing and still struggle and still recover. So when I got involved in organizing, it was around climate change. After Superstorm Sandy, I got involved in the New York State Assembly, working as a legislative intern, focusing on criminal justice policies, housing rights, and climate change. And then I got involved in other campaigns. I was a staffer for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who we know is a congresswoman in year 14. And I believe that now more than ever, we need working class representation. We saw Trump happen in 2016, but I think that the pre-existing conditions were there for this economy, for this country, because we're seeing that a lot of people are fed up with the status quo. So for me, we know that going back to normal, it's not going to work for the working people. We need to have a vision forward. So I do believe that Donald Trump is the biggest threat to this country, but we also need to have a plan to protect working people. So that's why I'm a big advocate for free public college tuition, the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, because I believe that we need working class representation and shouldn't have to come at the cost of unjust wars. I believe that poor children shouldn't have to go to wars and fight for these endless wars that are costing not just trillions of dollars, but millions of lives. So that's the kind of representation I want to bring. And I'm ready just to fight. We have 3 weeks left until Election Day, June 23rd. And we're looking really, really good. So I'm excited.
Shan, I'm going to ask you if you by any chance have headphones that you could put in, because the sound quality is not great for me. And I'm wondering if that might be a problem that other people have. Do you possibly have a pair of headphones that you could, or earbuds or something that you could use?
Give me 1 second. I could definitely get it.
Yeah, thank you. While Shan is out there, this business in New York has been, on one hand, very, very inspiring. And on the other hand, to the extent to which there have been any problems with police at all, very, very concerning. And a lot of people are talking about defunding the police. And Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, talked about taking some of the funding away from the police department in New York. What's happening in America, and we realize this now, is that we spend so much money funding brute force and not nearly enough money funding soul force. One of the things that I talked about when I ran, of course, was a Department of Peace. Because just like you can't just fight sickness, you have to cultivate health. You can't just fight acts of violence and try to suppress them or eradicate them. You have to cultivate peace. We should be spending more money, obviously, on cultivating the factors which create more societal peace. Thank you for coming back, Shan. Let's try you now.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yeah, it's a whole lot better. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, so talk to me about what's happening with the police in New York. Talk to me about what happened. You yourself have been to some of the Black Lives, and also, so where is the district exactly?
So New York 5 is a working class district. It is a minority majority district in Southeast Queens. So it covers the greater parts of Jamaica, including Hollis, the Rockaway Peninsula, and parts of Nassau County, including Elmont and Valley Stream. We have a lot of homeowners, but we also have been the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic, where we've lost a lot of people from our community to the pandemic. So that's where we are.
Now, you were born there. Where were your parents born?
My parents were from Bangladesh originally.
Wow. And
Yeah.
they came here. Did they meet here, or were they already married when they came here?
Yeah, they met here. They came here very young. My mother came here at the age of maybe, I think it was 14. My father came here around my age. They were both immigrants, and my father waited tables for quite some time. Now he drives for Uber. My mother used to clean hotel room for a living. So they have the working class experience trying to live that American dream as an immigrant family. And, I think they're trying to really, they instill so many values in me of, trying to take care of one another, our family, but also trying to be there for our neighbors. So they're really excited about this campaign and, what's going to happen in this country going forward.
Well, I bet they're very proud of you that you're running.
Yeah, they are.
Is there a large Bangladesh community in your district?
Yes, Bengali people have actually been a part of this American quilt for quite some time, as early as the late 1800s through the Harlem Renaissance, and then they've been part of New York for so long, part of the diverse culture that we have. In Queens, I believe we have over 180 languages spoken. So, in Jamaica, Queens, we have a huge enclave of Bengali people, not just Bengali people, but other people from South Asian diaspora, from India, from Singapore. So we have a really diverse district.
Are there any Bengali members of Congress?
It's hard to answer that because there was a representative, and I believe he was in for one term in Michigan. I forgot his name, but he had Bengali heritage. So I think technically he might have been the first Bengali representative, but we'll see. I know Nabila Islam is running in Georgia, in Georgia 7. So we could possibly be the first two Bengali representatives in Congress.
I thought the other day in Washington, D.C., when the president walked out of the White House and cleared the way for his parade over to the church, right, for the photo op with the Bible.
Yeah.
I had been there just an hour before, and as with all of the protests that you see in pictures, on television or on the net, you see this extraordinary cultural, ethnic, racial disparity, not disparity, but variety that is the America today. And then he walked out of the White House, this parade of older white men, and it was really like the old America leadership model versus the new America.
Yeah.
New America, I thought it was in such striking contrast. So tell me, you're elected to Congress. We've got some real problems. What are you going to do? What would be your wish list for what you could do? Obviously, as a Congress member, you're one of 435 members. It's not like you can just go in with a magic wand. But what are the kinds of things that you would like to do? What would be the kind of legislative issues that you would like to bring to the fore in order to change this country?
Yeah, we've seen the police brutality in this country has been going on for a very, very long time. And it's come to the tipping point with the death of George Floyd. And it should have come to this point, actually. We've lost so many lives, from Sean Bell to Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. The list goes on and on and on. And I think the American people are just done with the status quo. So I've been a vocal advocate for criminal justice rights for a very, very long time as an activist. But as a member of Congress, one of the first things I want to do is look to divert funding from policing back into our communities for things like education, housing, and healthcare to improve the quality of life. I also believe that we need to reparate our communities, address the systemic racial income inequality in our Black communities through the means of reparations, also through the means of supporting our Black-owned businesses and having universal basic income of $2,000 a month. And I think that in a way we need to really address the sins of this country that's been long overdue for over 400 years. America has yet to do that.
Did you see the bill that Karen Bass has led, and then Harris and Booker are leading in the Senate, that the Democrats are going to put forth tomorrow?
I haven't had a chance yet. I've been so overwhelmed with campaign.
Yeah. Well, they're putting out a bill tomorrow. Of course, in the Senate, it will be getting a lot of pushback from Republicans, but it is a plan for the transformation of policing. It feels to me, however, that it needs to go deeper. I mean, some of these things are so obvious about the immunity, about the about chokeholds, things that are just, it's so horrible that they even have to be worked on. Why did the problem even get to this? But it seems to me that we also need to be having a conversation and action around a deeper transformation. You know, when I was a little girl, there was a television show called Andy Griffith, and it was about a friendly sheriff, you know, and he was always having to do some psychological counseling. And that was a kind of template that I grew up with. Romanticized, obviously, and glorified as it was, the idea of the, and I don't remember seeing many Black people on Andy Griffith, but it was the idea of really this idea that the police are here to protect and to serve. And of course, we have transitioned into this model. I know you yourself are an ex-Marine. You had to be trained to be able to kill an opponent, to kill an enemy. That's not what domestic police force is supposed to be about. They're supposed to be to protect and to serve. You know, a friend of mine was telling me earlier today that she used to be involved in a program in Santa Monica, California, where there were domestic violence calls that they would take the social workers with the police, because it seems to me there's so many things that the police have to do, where really a social worker, a nonviolent communicator, someone with nonviolent communication skills, citizen patrols, et cetera, would be better. Is this the kind of conversation you would try to bring into Congress?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think you pretty much summed it up best. You know, even Gloria Steinem said it, that I think the hardest thing for human beings to do is to really unlearn everything we've ever learned. And, you know, growing up in this country, learning the American history, we kind of glorified and sugarcoated the history of this country and the sins we've created, without really digging deep and acknowledging that a lot of these issues are still present. It's really trickled down in you know, in other ways of injustices, not just police brutality. I think it's intersectional, but we're seeing it through housing discrimination. We're seeing it even through the coronavirus pandemic, where communities of color have been affected the most. So our communities are underfunded. So I think that we need to have a serious conversation. We've seen it in Rwanda, we've seen it in South Africa, where, you know, they've acknowledged, the government has acknowledged their sins. And the, you know, the United States of America government, we have yet to do that, because we want to pretend that, you know, it's done, it's over with, we need to just move on. But we can't move on if these systemic institutions are still in place and still oppressing people, marginalized people. So it's a serious issue, and it's something that I want to bring to Congress and have that kind of voice.
I want to remind all of you to go to the progressivecandidatesummit.com page, Progressive Candidate Summit, and look at that donation page. Hopefully you will help Shan and other candidates to get where they need to go. Your primary is on June 23rd, is that correct?
That is correct.
And also Shan's site is Shaniyat, SHANIYAT, Shaniyat2020.com. Now, let me ask you about what you were just saying. Gregory Meeks is a Black man, isn't he?
That is correct.
Okay, so you've had a Black man as your congressional representative. And the Democratic Party has quite a few Black congressional representatives. Mm-hmm. And we had a Black president. And we had 2 Black attorneys general. So why are things as bad as they are?
Yeah, you know, this is why we need working class representation. You know, I live in public housing, and I hear the police sirens outside my window on a daily basis. I kid you not. As soon as I step out, I see my Black brothers and sisters being stopped and harassed by the police for unwarranted reasons. I myself have been stopped and frisked. So even though my experiences may be different, I could empathize with the lived experiences of living in fear of not knowing what could happen to us at any moment. And when I look at the policies, when I look at Gregory Meeks himself, I respect the fact that he is a Black man and he's had different experiences from me. And he's been representing this community for 22 years. However, in these 22 years, we've seen that he's endorsed Michael Bloomberg for president, who, you know, he was the architect for stop and frisk and traumatized communities like New York 5. We've seen him support the Blue Lives Matter bill, which would give the police a protected class in this country. And so, you know, it's hard for me to really, I believe that as a community, it's hard to really trust this kind of leadership if we're not going to really speak up when the justices have been there for a very long time.
My question, though, remains, why is it? What is wrong with our political establishment? And I assume the number is just money, and the answer is money in politics.
It's
right?
simple as that. It's money in politics. Both Republicans and Democrats have been bought out by the big corporations on Wall Street. And when we have that kind of influence in our politics, we know that our elected officials are going to be doing the bidding on their behalf of their donors, because that money speaks louder than the votes of the everyday working person. Yeah.
So everybody, we know that the cancer underlying all the cancers that we're having to deal with in this society is the undue influence of money on our politics, particularly corporate money. And that is a monstrous influence that has grown over the last few decades and came to its apex with the Citizens United ruling, which gave corporations really unlimited power to influence elections. And so when you have the real progressives who are really standing for fundamental change, and that fundamental change really has an economic basis. So underneath, you're talking about the undue influence of money, and what that has caused is a massive transfer of wealth over the last 40 years, so that you have 1% of Americans who control 90% of the wealth. The main instrumentation of that transfer has to do with our tax policy. Our 2017 $2 trillion tax cut gave 83 cents of every dollar to the very richest among us. I assume, Shan, you would want to repeal that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think for way too long, our corporations have been getting away with these injustices. We're even seeing during this pandemic that billionaires have made $535 billion while working families have lost everything. You know, we've lost our jobs, we're losing homes, and it's just unbearable to think about.
And I think a lot of the protests that are going on right now, it's not just George Floyd, it's every Black man and Black woman who has seen injustices at the hands of the police or the criminal justice system. And it's even bigger than that, because it goes to all of the economic injustices, environmental injustices, which are all, as we know, the word intersectionality, they're all connected at this point. So that, you know, and I'm sure in neighborhoods such as that which you wish to represent, you've got children going to some subpar schools where they don't necessarily have the school supplies with which to teach your child to read by the age of 8. And if they can't learn to read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased, and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. That's why sometimes, even when people talk about reparations in the form of race-based policies, and they talk about things like giving more money to historically Black colleges, or they talk about home ownership loans or grants, my problem is with how many children are locked out way before the age when you could even be talking about getting into college one way or the other. Shan, there are a couple of people who want to ask you some questions, so if it's okay for you. In the meantime, while I'm bringing these lovely people into the summit room, I want you please to check out progressivecandidatesummit.com. Do what you can, help these candidates get there, help Shan. You know, don't think that a small donation doesn't matter. I know a lot of us are kind of constricted at the moment financially with all this, but we have got to support these candidates if we're serious about trying to get them in there. Hi, I see that Kadeem Majed is already with us. Kadeem, welcome.
Hi, Marianne, how's it going?
Really good, thank you. And thank you for being here. And go for it and ask Shaniat whatever question you want to ask him, and so that you guys can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Okay, yeah, Shan. So due to the current conditions of our society, what bold actions need to be taken by politicians in power, both at the local level and federal? And how will you do so if you were to get into office?
Yeah, thank you, Kadeem, for that question. As someone who looks to be the next representative of New York 5, I believe that we need to really repeal the system from the bottom up, inside out. So what I want to do as well is divert the police funding from New York City. And there's no reason why an institution like the NYPD has a budget of $6 billion when we should be allocating these funding for housing.
Hold on, is it $6 billion?
Yes, $6 billion, that is correct.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And you know, when we think about the scope of the combination of housing, community services, and education, it still doesn't match the $6 billion that we spend on police funding. So I believe now more than ever, then we need to defund the police. We need to divert those funds back into our communities. And I want to support a mayoral candidate next year, because we do have a very important election around that next year, who will take on the police unions to hold them accountable to a higher standard. We need to hold our police chiefs and the DAs accountable. I think that this has gone long enough. And again, I've talked about it earlier. I'm a vocal advocate for reparations. I believe that we need to address the sins of this nation, as well as address the systemic racial income inequality gap in this country. And until we do that, we're going to continue to see the problems in this country. But I think that 2020 and going onward with more progressive candidates who are putting out the same policy plans, I think we could get there.
Well, I'm sorry, go on, Kadeem. Response, more questions, anything? How's it going? How did you feel he did? How did Sean do?
No, I think he answered my question perfectly fine. And a lot of the thoughts and questions that I have for him were answered by your questions that you had asked him. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having been with us. Thank you. You know, Sean, I think what I learned as a candidate was that when we talk about income inequality, people want to know exactly what we would do. Obviously, with 1% controlling more wealth than bottom 90%. So we could repeal that particular tax cut, and we could end these ridiculous corporate subsidies, right?
Absolutely.
Wealth tax, you support a wealth tax?
Yes, absolutely. I believe that we need to create incentives for companies to keep jobs in America, especially imposing a tax on the executive, so that way we can keep the jobs here in our country. So I do support wealth tax for sure.
Yeah, you were talking about the bailout, and the bailout has just been a continuation of the same kind of corporate dominance, $500 billion sent to corporate America rather than direct cash relief. We could have right now $2,000 a month could be going to every adult, $1,000 to every child, and $1,000 after that. And I believe that the level of despair that is occurring in the hearts and in the circumstances of millions and millions and millions of Americans who were just barely holding on even before this happened, even before COVID, right?
Right, exactly.
It's extraordinary, but at the same time, and this is why I asked you before about the political establishment, the same corporate attitude, the same governmental attitude by which we protect corporations and then do a little bit for everybody else. They didn't do any differently under a Democratic president in 2008. And so basically, it's just the same kind of template. And that's really my question. How do the Democrats, how do we get the soul of the Democratic Party back? The Democratic Party that I grew up with was, it was there for the people. How are you going to fix this?
I think the first step going forward is pushing the Democratic nominee, which is, looking to be Joe Biden, in the right direction. We need a coalition of progressives to come together and really try to educate and really help Joe Biden see the realities of what working families face in this country. I want to make sure that we push him in the direction for Medicare for all, and ensuring that every person has a roof over their head, because these are the current realities and experience that people are going through. And the reason why we have Donald Trump in office to begin with is because everything that was in place before him was not working.
I agree with that, or it was working for a small group of people.
Right. It just was exactly. It was working. It was working, but it's just not.
For us,
99%. So I think that's really, really important to address. And I think the biggest part of that has to do with the big money influence in our politics.
Not just a big part of it. I would say 99.9%.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a woman who'd like to ask you a question, so I want to bring in Olivia Ramsar. Olivia, welcome to the Zoom room. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me. Due to the failing economy and increasing rate of unemployment as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, how do you see working and lower class Americans being able to survive going forward?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Olivia. I believe that we need to have a new economy that bails out the working people, and not just the billionaires that are running this country. So one of the things I want to do going to Congress is ensure that we protect workers' rights by having workers' bill of rights. We need to also protect and strengthen our labor groups. And I mentioned earlier, we also need to impose a corporate wealth tax on executives so we could keep jobs in this country. I think for too long, the working people have been left behind, and we could see that's why some people are so dissatisfied and are not part of the democratic process, because we lost so much hope because both Republicans and Democrats have failed us. So I think in order for us to heal and get back to center, we have to really bring working people with us to Congress. This is just not about me. This is not about any other candidate or even Joe Biden, because we do need to defeat Donald Trump, but we have to ensure that we bring the working people and working people agenda to the halls of DC.
Olivia, you live in the district, in Shan's district?
I live in the district next to his district.
And may I ask, what do you do for a living?
I'm a student.
Oh, where do you go to school? What are you studying?
I go to Wesleyan University in Connecticut, and I don't have a major yet, but I'm planning on majoring in government.
Ah, do you want to go into politics, you think?
Maybe not as a politician, but I do want to get involved in politics.
In policy, for sure. May I ask, what are your thoughts about what's going on in this country?
I think that the coronavirus pandemic, it shined a light on a lot of issues that were already there and kind of accelerated a process that was probably coming anyway. And I think that these protests are a result of that, in a sense, of just the disproportionate effect on Black people and people of color of the coronavirus, on top of this police brutality that's been happening for a long time. So I think just everything came into focus in these few months.
Do you feel hopeful with the protests?
I feel hopeful. Especially because it's only been about 2 weeks of protests, and there's already been a lot of change happening in the country. So I do feel hopeful that more change will come.
Good. I'm glad that you do. I think hearing how our young people feel about what's going on, it's so important that we continue to persevere. You know, it's interesting about age, because if it weren't for the pandemic, there would be a lot more people out on the streets. People who are over 65 are more nervous about going out there in terms of being with such big crowds, in terms of COVID. And I think that a lot of people are trying to find other ways that they can be active. But it has occurred to me that, people have even said things like, why isn't Bernie out there? Well, if I were Bernie's family, I wouldn't want him out there, in terms of the health issue. So you kids have even more of a burden on you. Did Shan answer your question okay?
Yes, it did.
Thank you very much for being with us in the Zoom room. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Shan, what you going to do about immigration? I know that's close to your heart. It was close to mine as well. My father is an immigration lawyer, was an immigration lawyer. He has passed, and both of his parents had immigrated here. What do you think we ought to do about immigration?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably been the biggest inspiration for me to run, actually. I had an experience going down to the border in Tijuana when Trump decided to send down the military to keep asylum seekers out of the US. And I saw the experiences firsthand, what these families are going through. The vast majority are women and children, who are escaping poverty, who are escaping, the destabilization of their government. And I think that a big part of that does have to do with the US government and how we destabilize governments down there. So we need to address that, but also we need to really humanize people who are coming here. So many cases and programs being convoluted into one. We need to ensure that the civil cases and immigration cases are two different things, ensuring that every person is treated like a human being with dignity and respect. And we do ensure that CBP and ICE are not violating human rights. We've seen it, that's been unchecked. So that's some of my steps going forward, ensuring that every person is welcome in our country, because I believe that in a world that we should all be treated equal, that we're all humans, we should all be loving each other.
How are you going to, when somebody's been there for 22 years, your opponent has been in the office for 22 years. On one hand, it's like, please, everybody, we've got to get some new blood here, particularly because I think when it comes to the presence of this president, I think simply needs to be said that the Democratic House of Representatives has not been successful at mounting the kind of opposition to this president's agenda that needs to be mounted. It's not personal. That's why we've endorsed people like Shahid Buttar. I have a lot of respect for Nancy Pelosi as the first woman Speaker of the House, but guys, the job has not been getting done. There's been almost an acquiescence and enabling to the president for all intents and purposes, regardless what the intentions were. But the problem is, on one hand, you look at someone like your opponent and say, my God, he's been there 22 years, enough is enough, move over, let somebody else come in. But then on the other hand, you have a whole generation of people in your district who grew up with that name. He was their congressman. So how do you, as a candidate, how do you break through in a situation like that?
It's just really about expanding the electorate. Our campaign has encouraged a lot of young people to come out. There's this stereotype about young people not coming out to vote, but I think it really depends on the campaign and kind of messaging that you're putting out forward. Part of the reason why I'm running is because this is not about me. Bernie Sanders has put that message out that it's not me, us. For me, this is something I do not want to do forever. I believe that every policy that we make is going to really determine the future of tomorrow. So, elected politicians are going to come and go, but we also need to be relevant. And I think that I want to be able to be in a position where I could, cultivate young minds and help bring up young people and take the reins going forward, because we know that the policies are affecting them now are going to affect them tomorrow. So I think expanding the electorate is really important, but also having these serious conversations with our aunties and uncles and parents at the dinner table to talk about these issues that matter to us. And I think that young people should have a voice in this democratic process, and they shouldn't be ignored.
Do you think that that's happening for you in this campaign?
Yes, absolutely. We feel it. We see it.
And do you feel that, would you take a stand for free college and university at state colleges and universities?
Yes, absolutely. Students in this country are in $1.6 trillion in debt. While we spent over $6 trillion on unjust wars over the last 20 years, and it's gotten us nothing. It's at the cost of so many innocent lives. We drained our economy. So why can't we bail out the people that we have here? So I don't think it's a lot to ask for.
Yeah, we need to shift from an economic to a humanitarian bottom line. We've got to stop financializing our identity. We are more than consumers. We are more than producers. We're human beings with aspirations for love and for meaning. And we somehow, when it comes to our economic and our political system, we have so deviated from a deep, deep humanity, with capitalism having so disconnected from any moral responsibility towards people, planet, and animals. But I don't think any of us can be naive about how hard it's going to be in office to make those changes, as long as all that money can be spent on influencing candidates. I know big pharmaceutical companies spent $284 million last year alone. Oil and gas, $125 million. And that just takes me back to you who are watching, because those companies and those influential factors, they're not going to be sending money to Shan Chowdhury. Wall Street's not going to be sending money to Shan Chowdhury. They're not taking a stand for Medicare for all. They're not taking a stand for the Green New Deal. They're not taking a stand for free college and universities. They're not taking a stand to make every school in America a palace of culture and learning and the arts. They're not taking a stand for the removal of these college loan debts. And that's because the entire economic model is one in which these corporations have been allowed over the last few decades to act as though fiduciary responsibility to their own stockholders was their primary responsibility. And then they would say, well, we're not talking about people get up in the morning and try to figure out how to hurt children. That's not what it's about. But they do get up in the morning and don't think that it's their responsibility to have to think about the hurt children. It's amoral, it's not immoral, but it has immoral consequences. And the reason we need to send people like Shan Chowdhury to Congress is because that's what the government should be. The government should be there for the people. Okay, if a CEO is there for his or her stockholders, to some extent, we understand that model. But the government has to be there for the people, and nothing is more traditionally American than pushing back against overreach by capitalism when such overreach occurs. That's why we have a labor unions, labor movement in this country. That's why we have child labor laws. And part of this massive transfer of wealth over the last 40 years has been anti-labor. Although now, with the police unions are acting in a way that is completely opposite of what we normally associate with unions, Sean. So when you get to Congress, you're going to have your work cut out for you.
Yeah.
I want to give you an opportunity. I want to make sure everybody goes to progressivecandidatesummit.com. I hope you will donate not only to Sean, but to any of these other wonderful candidates. Also, ShanaYacht2020.com, check out. And also, Sean, even if somebody does not live in your district, is there a way that they can be of help to you? What ways you have for people to volunteer if they're not in your district?
Yeah, anyone can volunteer. You don't have to live in the district. Because we are self-isolated, we can actually phone bank from the own comfort of your home. So if you want to help us text bank or phone bank from these next 2.5 weeks, email us at info@SHAN2020.com.
Are you having fun? That's an interesting factor to me. Are you enjoying campaigning?
I've become obsessed with it. I think it's kind of unhealthy in a way, but
well, it's a completely unnatural environment. I mean, it's like,
yeah, I mean, naturally, I'm a competitive person, so I'm enjoying the thrill. But and I think what's keeping me going is that I know that I'm doing this for the right reasons, and that I have a great group of people around me who are always pushing me in the right direction. And it's because the people who have put this campaign together are people who were not meant to be in office. I live in public housing. My campaign manager lives in the basement. These are not your everyday people that you see in office. And I think that's pretty unique in that.
Well, the founders called the House of Representatives the People's House. They made the People's House so that the blacksmith and the farmer and the tailor could be in that house. That's part of what makes it so beautiful. I remember a friend of mine who said, AOC, what is she? She was a bartender. I said, that's what's so glorious.
Yeah.
That's what's so American. She's a bartender. She's an educated woman, and she's a bartender. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. How you look at what the system so often calls the lawyers and the businessmen, and I'd have to say to that whole crowd, how's it going? How are we doing? We're not doing so well. I think we need more artists and healers and scientists and teachers, yes. All kinds of people. And also I want to mention, I want everybody to be very clear with Sean's race. But Sean has a tough one because it is a 22-year incumbent. But I want to remind you that most people don't win their first time. So your support of Sean, if you think it's a difficult race, that's all the more reason for you to donate and to help him. If we want, and we all want, look what's happening in this country. We need what Abraham Lincoln would call a new birth of freedom. And we're not going to have a new birth of freedom until we have new people in Congress, new people in the White House. It's simply, the obstructions are right there. I think that the protests are showing something I believe for a long time. The problem isn't with the consciousness of the American people. Do we have haters? Yeah, we have haters in this country. We've always had haters in this country. But right now, with social media and with a president who's winks way more than any president ever should to some of the worst, most aggressive elements of America, we have a lot of conviction, a lot of strategy, a lot of very serious activity by some of the most racist elements, some of the most xenophobic elements, anti-Semitic elements, homophobic, etc. But there are a lot more lovers than haters. But the lovers have to get more serious now. When the haters have been screaming, it's not enough for love to whisper. And one of the ways in which you shout it from the mountaintops, one of the ways is protest. But it's like I've been saying on my social media, please, dear God, may all those protesters be registered to vote. You cannot leave electoral politics out of the formula for what will and can fundamentally alter this country. So you're meeting him here. You met him tonight, Shan Chowdhury. He's running in New York 5, in Queens, right in the thick of it, right in the heart of it, among people who are as deeply at the effect, correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct.
People who are as deeply at the effect of the injustices environmental injustices, criminal injustices, economic injustices. If we want change, you've got to put change in those seats. And the seats of the House of Representatives are a perfect example. I wish you the very, very best. Sean, do you have any final words you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you want to volunteer for a campaign, you can email us at info@shan2020.com. This is not in the moment kind of thing. We've seen so many people aspire to run for office, and sometimes they come and go. But I've realized that I've given up everything to be here. Even right before I decided to run for office, I wanted to become a teacher. I was this close to filling out my application, but I decided that if we wanted to really change this country and change the way we revolutionize and be creative, reimagine everything, we need everyday people to step up. I didn't want to be on the sidelines anymore and be cynical and complain about what's not working. So yes, we do need to vote, but we also need more people running for office. So I hope to, once I do become the next Congress member, I hope to support other people coming up and running for office. I think that the squad can't do it by themselves. There are only 4 people, the 435 members of the House of Representatives. So it's exactly why I'm running. That's exactly why so many other people are running. Well,
the fact that I've been a candidate, that's why I have such compassion for those of you who are doing it. I know what it takes. And I know that it's exhilarating and obsessive, but I also know that it's brutal in many ways too. So I have great compassion and admiration for you. And I hope that you feel a lot of that compassion and admiration coming across the screen at you right now. And I hope it also takes some forms of dollars and cents as well. And when you get to Congress, I would just ask that the obsessiveness that you feel now be just as obsessed working on behalf of your people, on behalf of the people once you get there as you are now. And if you're doing that, and we send enough people to Congress who are doing that, guess what? America's going to be okay.
Yeah.
That's our vision. That's our intention. Much love to you. Thank you so, so much for being with us, Sean. I really appreciate it. I want all of you to know that tomorrow night we have Jen Perelman, who is running in Florida against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. That's going to be a very, very interesting one tomorrow night. And then after that, the night after that, we have Keita Haynes, who's running in Nashville, Tennessee, and her story is so amazing. So we have 2 women in the 2 nights coming up. I hope you'll be with us same time, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. East Coast time, and tell your friends. Remember, an idea when it is shared becomes even stronger. That's what's happening with these protests. We are on a roll. America is on a roll. We're going to persevere. There is going to be a new birth of something beautiful. We have no choice now. We have work to do. Let's all do it. Thank you very, very much. And I'll see you tomorrow night. Bye, Sean. God bless.
Bye.